A mother, a founder, a philanthropist, a fighter. I can go on and on about Lindsay and her story because that's how inspiring she is. Lindsey Witmer Collins is the founder of Welcome App Studio, and I've always wanted to invite a founder to my podcast. Undoubtedly, it is very important for a founder to understand their users. In fact, even more than the user researcher. Her story has a lot of wisdom for all the user research enthusiasts out there. I am your host, Sweekriti, and this is India's first user research podcast, Core User to UX. It's a pleasure to have you here. I have discussed a lot of stories with you, and I can't wait to tell my listeners those stories. So, thank you so much for joining in.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Awesome. So, let's start with the most interesting topic first, which is your app, Who Farted? and the name and the story of the app are equally interesting. So, let's start from there. Like, what motivated you to make the app, and what was the journey of, understanding how to make the app? And all of this is important because you are a founder. And till now, I've only invited user researchers on my podcast. And getting a founder's perspective, like when the founder is the main researcher or the main visionary, then what happens, and inculcating those principles. So I'd love you to take us over that journey.
Yeah, so just at a high level to understand my landscape, I have an app research design development studio. So we have built, designed, launched probably close to 200 products at this point, over 14 years by now. And so we are always doing client or agency work. And at the same time, we have started developing and launching our own products. And this has the benefit of really putting and keeping ourselves in our clients' shoes in terms of their stakes and perspectives and the process. So we kind of can deliver better to them because we can have more empathy for the situation they're in. And Who Farted is a project built purely for joy, literally to make kids laugh out loud. That's it. That's our number one goal, is to make kids laugh out loud. It started, the seed of the idea was eating cereal with my son, who's 3 at the time, in the morning. And we were guessing what it sounds like when a butterfly farts, or when a frog farts, or when a crab farts. And so we were cracking each other up. What does it sound like when a strawberry farts? Kids at that age, farts are so funny. And it's like the most universal, or fart sounds, I would say. It's like the most universal thing that you can do. Like any toddler, no matter what language they speak, it's gonna laugh, get them to laugh. So something like this. So the seed of the idea was born through that, of like, what if we create some little digital worlds with characters, and we could play out our imagination of what it would sound like if these characters farted, with the goal of making kids laugh. Then we had that idea, we liked it, and it lived up here. And then the Ukraine war happened. My team is in Ukraine. My office was in Lviv, and the war was devastating to everyone. We also, the year prior to that, had basically a baby boom inside of the agency. I think we had 4 or 5 babies that year, including myself. And so there were all these toddlers running around us, most of whom had become refugees, right, over the period of that crisis. And then at that point, doing a project that would make them laugh became it was a good idea. Now it's we have to do it. Also because things were pretty heavy and serious, and it was an opportunity for us to create and just be creative and have fun, just purely have fun as makers, right? So then we did it. We built it. We also wanted to learn more about sound and animation, which are things that are not typically central to the experience for most apps. But for this one, it would be. And so that would give us an opportunity to learn and grow as an agency, bring those skills back to our clients as well. So we worked with a couple of different illustrators. We tested out those illustrators with our kids, what was resonating for them. our initial version just had a character who would fart when you tapped on them, and that was not engaging enough. So we zoomed out and we created like whole world. So there was like context. There were many, many characters in the world. And so there were lots of things for the child to tap. And then we also realized that we couldn't have the same fart sound just repeating over and over because it stopped being funny and it started sounding weird. So we then created, like, each character has like 4 different sounds that randomly are triggered. So there was a lot of iteration in those early days, just working with our kids and making sure that they made them smile. I think, it's the best thing for me with this product is that it's something my kids really want to use. And they would not lie to me about that because they're little and they're honest and they're not thinking about how it would make me feel. And that's a huge win. Most of the stuff that we create doesn't actually get used or read or listened to or whatever, like hit songs are not common, so to be able to create something that people actually really want and crave is a big feat, so, and that's always the goal. So that we were able to achieve that goal with our kids. But another layer on top of it was we basically created 12 imaginative worlds that you can scroll through and choose a world. And when you enter the world, there's a story, like a silly story that's rhyming. It's like a 4-line, or it's an 8-line poem, simple, funny poem. And we were able to recruit Emmy award-winning actors, famous comedians to do the voices for all the worlds. So we have like literally famous cast in the background. And all of the profits from the project are going to nonprofits that support children. So we chose the Children's Hospital in Kyiv. It's the largest children's hospital in Ukraine. The Environmental Defense Fund, which is helping to preserve the environment for our children. And also an agency that works in the U.S. to lobby for safer gun laws in the U.S., and which is a very more of a U.S.-centric problem that deals with children. So those are the 3 things we really wanted to benefit. So we're sending all of our profits there. 3 of the worlds are free, and then to unlock all the rest of the worlds, you need to get a Toots key, which is this shiny, swirling key. It looks like a skeleton key, like an old-fashioned key, and it has Toots etched in it. It's pretty silly. So we tried to make the process, the paywall, be really fun and funny as well, and also feel good. So that was fun for us to just kind of create something that was funny and fun and felt good all around.
The entire ecosystem and all the stories associated with this are extremely interesting, like from your conversation at your dinner table to Ukraine and all the nonprofits you are helping. This is a really interesting story. So hats off to you, Lindsey, for creating something like that. And the kids love it. So yeah, already.
Take a look. Download it. It's free in both app stores. So everybody should check it out. It's Who Farted Kids Story Games.
So I would like you to talk about the testing process with kids, because working with kids is an entirely different game and entirely different mindset. So what was it like testing the app with kids and then getting those inputs and deciding what to keep, what not to keep? But actually, it's easier to work with kids because they're super honest. So you can, inculcate their inputs very quickly. So what was your experience like?
Yeah, I loved the process because I love kids. And so I went to a couple of different preschools to do beta tests with kids, in addition to us testing it on our own. One of the main things that we learned was that our navigation had to be a little bit different. So I just watched the way that the kids sort of intuitively interacted with the interface. Initially, I thought they would want to swipe and that we would create a page turning animation, like a swipe page turn. That ended up being technically pretty difficult to pull off well because, well, that's a long story, but that ended up being, it was like kind of a big project to make that work. And and add sound to it. And it was a pain in the butt, but also like kids didn't actually intuitively do that. They knew it was a screen. They didn't think it was a book, And so having big buttons and arrows is really important. Designing for a pre-literate population is really interesting and fun because they can't read a thing. So like there are words, but we're trying to really visually communicate. So all of the worlds are really very richly illustrated, and you decide, okay, I want to go in that world, and then the story starts to be read to you. So the navigation, I think, was one of the biggest ones, and I changed it multiple times to make it more and more clear. At the last moment, I decided that I should do it differently, and we should actually put the buttons at the top of the interface, and we should have a back and a front up at the top and bright and purple. But my team was like, Lindsey, we got to launch this. The kids know how to use this. We validated that. So we're just going to launch, they kind of like just said, okay, it's time to stop iterating. We know that it's important to keep in mind, I think, as a founder, that you can kind of get lost in the sauce, if you will, and get in the weeds and be like, just want to perfect every single little detail. But at some point, it's good enough, I also got really caught up in volume. So I did all the sounds myself, besides obviously the narration of the stories. All the little sound effects I was finding and timing and creating these little sound files. So I was teaching myself how to do this, and moderating the volume of all of them was actually fairly difficult to do. And so I learned like, oh, I need to have like actual headphones on because I wasn't able to discern all that well. And I felt that there were some problems with some of the volumes in the world, and we launched anyway. And I have experienced the app now, and I'm like, this is fine, totally fine. Well, that happens fairly often to me, and I think it might probably happen to other founders as well. There's another app we're building where I designed this UX for creating a listing, creating a product and a list. And I had designed it and iterated on it multiple times before I showed it to somebody. Before I showed it to that person, I had in my mind like 10 things I thought were wrong with it or that I wanted to improve. And I showed it to her. I watched her use it. She didn't even notice the experience, which is how you know that you did a good job. She didn't comment on it. She just got it done. And when I asked specifically, like, okay, well, what was that like? Did you feel like it was easy or whatever? She's like, oh yeah, it was great. So I think it's something that just happens. You just get, I don't know if you're a perfectionist, if you're a little bit obsessive, which I am about UX. I just always feel like I can make everything better. But at some point, does it get the job done? Do people like it? Okay, let's launch and, zoom out a little bit.
Very interesting points you brought up here. First one being that if I was a kid, maybe that book animation would have appealed to me a lot because I grew with books, right? But today's kids start with screens. So they don't really care about books or anything, just those big buttons, and those clicks are more intuitive to them than book animation. So it's such a huge change that we are seeing. And thanks for bringing that up. So, this is also an example of the generational attitude and perspective change. And this is something we as designers should keep in mind, because to you, the book animation made sense, but the reality is very different from your generation to what is happening now. So that is a very interesting story. And yeah, to the point of iteration, you have to stop somewhere. In fact, even I was like this, but then user research is a very field intensive job, right? Even when I'm doing online research, I am in the participants world. And when you do such jobs, okay, you learn like what will actually work in the world and what is good enough and where to stop. So all credit to user research for that. And thank you for bringing that up. That's a really important point. So Lindsey, another thing that we talked about was the main principle of your organization, Welcome, and it's empathy. And I was really curious that why you chose that principle. I have heard user researchers talk about empathy, UX designers talk about empathy, you should empathize with the users. Yeah, because it sort of has become like our go-to term. But what made you choose empathy as a founder? And, because there are 100 things that you're looking after. So why this thing? What is so appealing or the story behind it?
I didn't intentionally or vocally choose empathy. It's who I am. And the way that I got started in this field was as somebody, so this was like way back in the day when like the App Store just launched, and like back when people were still using Blackberries, that was like the first wave, right? And I wanted to create a product. Back then, like nobody really knew how to do it, right? And so I thought, oh, well, I'll just find an agency and I'll hire them and they'll create my product. Simple as that, right? They'll guide me through it. But I didn't really understand the process, what was involved, what I should care about and pay attention to. And I just expected this other organization to walk me through it. What they did instead was just not deliver. They were pretty dishonest. They would deliver like these glimpses of things, but not really, they weren't getting my project done. And I didn't realize that until like 6 to 9 months later, because they were not being honest with me, but I thought I could trust them. And I had investors and people who had paid for real estate within this product. There were health coaches who were going to be listed within this product. It was a wellness related thing. So all of them were waiting. Okay, like we've invested in it. Like we have money invested in this product. When's it going to launch? I'm like, well, it's going to launch at this date, depending on what they said to me. And then they wouldn't deliver. And then I looked like a liar. Now I have to say, oh, okay, actually it's going to be delivered on this date. And then it wasn't. Well, it's going to be delivered on this date. And then it wasn't. And so that in turn, that was the worst part of it for me, is like, here, I'm not the kind of person who says I'm going to get something done and then I don't. I'm not the kind of person who doesn't deliver on time or be transparent. But this was a situation where I could not be transparent or honest because they weren't being transparent or honest with. I think that was a valuable experience in many ways, but it was like a dark night of the soul also for me, because I did spend a lot of money and pay them a lot of money. And then at the end, when I really realized this wasn't going to happen and I needed to find another plan, that's when I started learning about and basically constructing the process for myself in order to get the product done. So I apprenticed with a professor at MIT who owns a really successful user research and user experience design agency based out of Arlington, right outside of Boston. And he looked at my designs. He was pretty merciless in his feedback on them, and they were terrible because I was new, right? But I absolutely loved it. I was obsessed. Like I would stay up all night and kind of work on and tweak a UX and then show it to him. And eventually I realized, and he communicated to me, like, this is a way of thinking that I am well suited to and that I love. Just systems design, So I kind of found my place, and it felt really good. And then I had to figure out, how do you put together a development team? How do you manage them? What's a sprint? I worked with some developers who I just hired based in the US. There was not a lot of accountability or honesty or transparency there too. So like really, I walked away with an understanding of this process, with a knowing that I loved UX design. And also I basically limped over the finish line. It launched. But like I was pretty burnt at that point. It was early days in the App Store though, and I got a lot of press around this product. People actually really liked it. I got a lot of downloads. Like it was, in my mind, it was like a very mediocre product, right? Just because that's how, that's how I could sort of I understand how everything could be better all the time, So I was like, I don't know if this is any good, but people did really like it. And I got a lot of press, and I had a pretty big network at that time. And so people were reaching out to me, oh, I want to build an app too. These are early days. That was maybe 2011, 2010. And so I kind of understood the landscape. And it's like watching people who you like walk into a pond that is full of alligators. Like, this is going to be terrible. It's going to be a massacre. Like, you're going to lose a lot of money. Like, this is tough. It's tough to get across this with yourself still intact and your vision realized in a way that feels really good and is in integrity with what you wanted. And, getting over it just basically, I started consulting and helping them, and eventually started kind of doing it for them and building a team and researching what project management is, what is QA, like how do these things work, and I was like, I can carry you across this. I'm going to put you in a raft and I'm going to carry you across. At the time, I had another business that I wanted to start that was totally unrelated to software and technology. So I was just doing this work on the side. I had no revenue model. I had no website. I was just doing it for people. And I realized, well, just what happened over time was there was a lot of demand for this work. And so I stopped doing the other work and I just helped people create apps. And over the past, 14 years, I've been doing that, and built the agency that I needed back then and that I wanted, that would care about me and be invested in my vision, be transparent, do it the right way. So it doesn't just look good, but like the stuff that you can't see, the code is 100% guaranteed to be high quality. It's something that you can build upon that's going to perform for you. That's, you don't need to have a giant maintenance budget because it just works. So that's my story. And Welcome is, my initials are LWC. So initially when I got started, it was only me. And then we became a team. So I didn't just want it to be called Lindsey Witmer Collins or LWC, whatever, that's where I was. So I just switched around the letters and made Welcome, WLC, and then add the M, the W over. And that word, or the concept of welcome, to me embodies everything that good software is. And every user experience should be welcoming. And that's just the spirit of the work and how we do it.
That's a really interesting story. Your bad experiences led you to bring empathy forward and make it sort of your core principle. And yeah, that's really interesting. Now that you've told the story, I realize that a lot of things that we show to the world, like the world doesn't know where they're coming from. And there are so many stories behind it. So thank you so much for touching upon it. So another interesting thing that you talked about was you were developing this child care center app and your experience of going there and you being a mother. That was a really interesting arc. How did you tackle the challenges of it and how did you reiterate there? That was a really interesting story and I would really like my listeners to listen to it. So the stage is all yours.
Yeah, sure. So one of our clients is Brella. They are a fast-growing, exciting startup based in Los Angeles, founded by two mothers who wanted to redesign the model of childcare. And they have just an incredible hypothesis about how it should work and how they would set it up. And part of their work was that the space is the third teacher. And one of the founders is an amazing architect. So these childcare centers are world-class, some of the most beautiful, imaginative spaces made for little people. They're incredible. So they're building these beautiful spaces and also a model of childcare through which you can just decide that you want childcare that day, download the app, fill out some forms, and then just bring your kid there for 2 hours. No commitments. You can bring them there for an hour at a time, here or there. You make your own schedule. Yeah, I mean, it's a great model and concept. It's also super fun and exciting to build. We have built all of the software that runs the center. So the administration panel, like the front desk software, the parent mobile app, and how these things integrate, how they get data for business intelligence from that. And yeah, moderate all of the touch points with the parents digitally. So as a part of this process, I went and basically moved to LA for a month and brought my kids to Brella. And in doing that, I was able to touch not only use what we had built and designed together, but there are parts of the experience that we haven't dealt with yet. Our ultimate goal is to have custom designed every single touch point, but short term, there are, some things where they're using third parties for like automating form filling, for example. So by going there and using all of it, it helps me to understand, to know the parent experience from start to finish and advise on where we should really focus our resources in terms of the parent experience. And then I also spent some time shadowing teachers and the administrative, the front desk. There's so much more potential to build there. And we needed to be able to elucidate all of them and prioritize them and just decide, okay, we're going to focus on the parent experience, the teacher experience, the front desk experience, maximizing profit. So there's a whole model that we built around deciding whether or not to show somebody an available hour. It might be available, but we might not show it to them, or it might not be available, but we do show it. It's like the way that airlines book airplanes. They do it like there's a whole model for showing availability and also for pricing to make sure that all of it's dynamic and learning so that we are able to get the classrooms as full as possible while sticking to one of Brella's core tenets, which was to be available last minute for parents who need it. So that's where we reserve hours, hold them back until like 2 hours before. So it might show that it's not available, but then like the hour before it is, and how watching the traffic has helped us to figure out and balance those priorities, because obviously from a business perspective, it would be great to get it all booked up ahead of time. But what they want to do is be a last minute resource for parents and an as needed kind of thing. So if we're fully booked with kids who are like basically full time, no longer is it this place where anybody can come and go. Now all of a sudden it's a traditional childcare center. So we have limits on how much people can book. So very exciting and fun challenge that I like, just super enjoy all of it. I mean, we're working right now on like a dynamic scheduling for teachers because there are a lot of labor laws in California. So like you have to have a 15-minute break within the first 3 hours of starting your shift. You have to have lunch within X hours. You have to have, I could go down a whole rabbit hole, but basically staffing the rooms and allowing, so we always have the right teacher-student ratio, even if a teacher steps out. So they have to step out and then step back in. Another teacher steps out, steps back in. There's a resource teacher that will step in and fill in. And that's actually fairly complex to put together those schedules manually. So we're building a system that does it for the director, and they can just see, okay, this person needs to take their break at 11:15, like make sure they do it. Yeah. So that's what we're working on now. It's fairly, it's just fun and complicated, and to make it a simple experience for everyone is the ultimate challenge.
That was such an interesting story, Lindsay. I loved your anthropological approach to building a product. You went there, you stayed there, and
That is so interesting because there would have been so many factors that you wouldn't have thought about if you weren't there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Even just watching the teachers, there are certain things they need to track for infants, like diaper changes and nap times and things like that. How are they doing it right now? How easy or hard is it? How could we make it easier? Can be fairly, some of these tracking can be fairly complex. So yeah, and then, okay, we might understand that we can do this better, but is this the biggest priority for the center right now? A whole other discussion.
yeah, absolutely. And I also loved, like, you not only experienced the entire UX, the real life UX of the childcare center, but also kept the goals in mind and then developed the entire thing. And that is so important for creators, like be it developers or designers and even researchers. If you don't have the business seed in the idea you're creating, things will eventually fall apart. So even if you have the greatest UX and you are doing this, you are doing that, if your foundation is not business oriented, things can take a wrong turn. So thank you so much for sharing that story. Not only did I learn about this anthropological approach to building things, it's so cool, Lindsay. Absolutely. Like moving to a place and then learning all about it. That is an immersive way to create something and then keeping the business goal in mind. So thank you so much for sharing that story. It's really interesting. Lindsay, there was another interesting point that you had brought up in our intro call, and that was when founders are not all of their users, and how founders can fall into this trap of thinking that, okay, I would also use this app and I would like it to be my way. And it's an important point. I'll tell you why. Uh, Initially, there is not a lot of budget. So founders have this tendency to not invest in user research, which I understand that, okay, you know, you are tight on budget, you're tight on funding. But feeling to be a researcher as a founder is also not acceptable, right? So please talk about that, from a founder's perspective, that how to not fall into this trap of, you thinking that you're all of your users, and how do you tackle with this? What has your experience been like? Have you made this mistake ever? And if you have, how did you bounce back?
Yeah, so this is definitely like one of the traps. I feel like there are a few traps that we can fall into as founders. One of the ones is what we talked about before, where we can be overly perfectionist about things. One of them is like fear of launch, which is the psychology of that is pretty interesting. You create a product and like you don't launch it a lot. That happens a lot. And there's like a conversation to have. There are a lot of things that as a founder we start to become blind. So those are two things that I see. And then the third one is like, you are your user. You should be I hope you're your user, and that you're creating something that you're going to use, and that you do eventually use habitually. That should be true. And you are not all of your users, so you can't speak for all of them. And if you aren't showing your work to anybody throughout the process, the likelihood that you're going to get to the end and be really afraid to launch is like pretty good. You want to feel like you have validated your idea and you're confident in your product and you want people to have it. So it's good, even from a psychological perspective, to be involving other people in your process. For you, it's good for you. And it's also good for your product, because a founder can think it's all about features and get really caught up in creating more and more and more features and delaying launch, or over perfecting something. So I use that example in the other product that I'm creating, which is called That Thing I Told You About. You can go to toldyoabout.com and join the request an invite. It's really fun. So anyway, when I was testing that process, the add item process, that I felt like it wasn't good. And if I hadn't showed it to someone, I would have iterated on it at least 2 more times. And I didn't need to do that. And time is costly and money is money. right? So we want to be smart about how we're using our resources, and we're not just like tumbling down rabbit holes. Create it. It does the thing we want it to do well. That means we're ready to launch. And with Who Farted, that was the same thing too, where I was going down a rabbit hole with the page turn animation. Like I was ready to like commit and spend some time figuring out how to make that work on top of a bunch of other animations. There's like performance issues. There were so many things that were hard about it. And it felt to me super important when I was in the moment. Then I showed it to someone else. Why am I wasting it? Just put a button. Just put a button. Everybody understands that. We all can fall into those traps. And it's just really important to know what they are and to stay self-aware. When you start to feel like something's really important, when you start adding new features, are you just afraid of launching? And the other thing that I've seen, I'm working on a project that's under NDA, so I can't explain what it is, but it's kind of like the concept is great. And what the founder came to me with a vision of was the equivalent of like, I want people to come sit at a table and I'm going to give them like all these tools that they can use to create this really cool thing for themselves that I think they really want to create. So here's like oil pastels, here's paint, here's crayons, here's whatever, and they're going to sit down and make the thing. Likelihood of failure for something like that is really high. You don't just want to give somebody a whole bunch of features and be like, look at all the stuff you can do. Because you have to, number one, convince them that they want to make this thing. And then once you've done that, you have to make it really easy for them. People don't want to need to learn anything new or try hard, really at all. So what you want to do is be like, okay, you want to create this thing? Tell me, what do you really hope to get out of this? Here's 3 options. Okay, you choose one option. Great. So we recommend that, you come into this experience twice a week. So let's set a plan. Okay, here's your plan. So you say, I'm going to do this on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we know like creating habits, if you create a plan, you're much more likely to follow through. So we have them create their plan. Okay, so now they know I'm going to create this thing. This is the thing I really want to create. And here's my plan that I'm going to do it. And then when I get that notification or prompt, it's really easy for me to then create. So rather than being like, okay, so now you need to write, it's like, we'll just hit the record button and talk to us for 15 minutes. And then we'll create something, with it. How do we, rather than being like, here, sit down, choose from all of this bevy of options, versus we've created a plan for you. We're going to put you on this journey and we're going to walk you through it, and it's going to be frictionless. So that's an example of that too, because the founder is somebody who's highly motivated to create this thing, and in their mind they want to have all these tools, but a normal person would have to figure out like, what are these? How do I want what? So yeah.
That's a really interesting point you brought up, Lindsay. And I know it sounds very commonsensical that people don't want to learn or don't have much time to invest on something, but for some reason, like app creators can't understand it and they focus on educating the user more without understanding that the user doesn't want to be educated. Like there are thousands of things they already learn every day. A lot is going on in their life, and then you are putting some extra thing for them to get educated on.
Yes.
I don't know. No. Why is that idea not being accepted? Or I mean, because even in my experience, it's like we'll give this demo, we'll give that demo. I'm like, no one's interested. But
no one wants to read your demo. No one wants to learn how to use your product. As founders, like sometimes we can think that they will be as motivated as we are. They won't. They won't. So
yeah. And that is very important. And I've also mentioned this in my previous podcasts, that a lot of what I've learned about research and user research is from investing, right? So what you just told me about is thinking about the worst case scenario, right? Even in investing, we think about the worst case scenario, that, okay, what could go absolutely wrong? And then what my situation will be. So it's not directly related, but you are thinking about all the users who are motivated, not so much motivated, and then creating or starting from the lowest common denominator and then building up, right? So, for example,
Mhm.
creating a plan is part of that strategy that,
Mhm.
make things as easy as possible, right? With
Mhm.
some effort threshold, and then let people uh, do their own thing, but make it as easy as possible. So yeah, that's really interesting story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I've been thinking about and like obsessed with designing and testing onboarding, which like how do you welcome people into your product? And how much information do you ask for them? When do you ask for it? Do you need it? I tried in the past year to design apps that have basically no onboarding at all. You just download and you don't have to sign up or give your information or your phone number and other data. You don't have to sit through a tutorial. You can just basically self-serve. And then you can create an account at a later point when it becomes really relevant that that's necessary. Like you created some data, you want to save it. Okay, well, let's create an account now. And then now I've been thinking a lot about, for more complex, for products where we are not necessarily okay, so the ideal scenario for an app is that you're taking something that people are already doing and you're making it faster and easier. You can hit that out of the park. If you're creating something that requires them to create a new habit, where it might be something they want to do, but like they need to have some motivation to do it and to show up, that's a higher cliff to climb. And so in those cases, what we've been working on designing are journeyed onboardings where we kind of, ask you what you're here for, which allows us to also communicate what this app can do for you. But in a way in which you become engaged in that. So we're here, what do you want to achieve? And then we're like, okay, let's set you on this journey where this is how we're going to get this done. I'm going to take you to this spot of the app right now. I'm going to take you directly here. You need immediate help. Okay, I'm going to take you directly here, post something to this expert, and you'll get a response. You want a sense of community? Okay, I'm going to take you to the community feed. Like, check it out, introduce yourself, blah, blah, blah. So, like, or, I want to create this thing. Okay, let's make a planner. I want to be more mindful. Okay, let's set some reminders. Whatever it is to kind of just cater the onboarding to giving them the thing that they want to get out of the experience. That's what I'm working on now, which, can take a myriad forms depending on what the product is, but that basic setup. What do you want to achieve? Okay, we're going to help you with that.
Absolutely. That was an interesting take on onboarding because onboarding has always been, and I think will always be an issue. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you so much for joining in, Lindsay. This has been a delightful conversation. Your perspective as a founder has helped me become a better user researcher because we have talked previously as well. And I've thought about the stories you have told and tried to implement it. So this means a lot. Oftentimes people don't understand that things are not isolated and things don't exist in silos and we can constantly learn from each other. But still there is tendency to become niche. And I understand that because the world is becoming that way. You have your niche audience, you have your niche this, you have your niche that. But your brain doesn't work that way. It learns from everything and everywhere. So you coming to the show and sharing your story is a huge thing for me. Thank you so much.